lots of mathematical calculations in order to guess the right block, right? And this is the work which is actually needed to validate one of those blocks. When speaking of proof of work, you also need to speak about difficulty. So basically how difficult it is just to calculate the right hash. And nowadays it takes up to 10 minutes per block. And as I said, each block contains the hash of the previous block, which means that in terms of trying to temper the blockchain or temper these transactions, you would need to recalculate every block before that block you're trying to change, right? Which makes it practically impossible to add some changes to the blockchain, and this is what makes it secure in the end. As I said, we have a decentralized network, right? We have the decentralized and distributed ledger based on consensus of the network itself, which means that we take 51% of the network which need to agree on a transaction, on a block, and if majority agrees, then you can validate. What else to mention? Yeah, transactions are then, of course, irreversible based on that what I just explained. So, proof of work versus proof of stake. Basically, proof of work is determining the fraction of the calculation power, so of the hash rate basically, within the whole network, which determines how probable it is that you actually are able to calculate and validate one of these blocks. Yeah, there it is. So it's quite simple, right? The more power your equipment has, the higher your hash rates, the better it is in terms of calculating each single block and actually being able to mine them, one of these things.
Can you ask questions later
yeah.
on, or
you also can ask now. It's
okay. The calculation power nowadays, it's mining is a scale game, right? So we have all these big miners,
yeah.
the cloud miners, they will outperform you, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the calculation power. How?
Yeah,
how
I've got a few points to that later on. So
Mm-hmm.
like the key points in terms of mining and what's needed to really be profitable these
Okay,
days.
yeah.
Because not only hash rate anymore is a key factor.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
some others amongst it which come into play as well.
The energy costs.
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah. But in
Okay.
a few slides I will talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so proof of stake, on the other hand, is basically then the fraction of how much tokens, how much stake you actually own. The more stake you have, the more probable it is that you are the one miner who is chosen to being able to validate the block. Yeah, exactly. So is the blockchain important? I would say nowadays it is. It's not something you can just wipe off the table anymore. It's there, and it's, I would say, becoming more and more important for the next few years, for sure. So basically, it is potentially transforming, to my mind, the very basic pillars of our society. It is definitely influencing the way our economy works, our governance systems work, our trade understandings work, right? And yeah, changes conceptual understandings of trade, ownership, and of course of trust. How parties interact, how they rely on each other, stuff like that. And all these factors summing up to cryptocurrencies as we have them today, in order to facilitate any kind of trade, whether being it sending money back and forth, claiming ownership of resources, no matter what. You could understand as a trade. And then in the end, we have, as I mentioned, these collective bookkeeping system. It's like...
Try not to touch this
yeah,
screen,
it's
it
hard.
just zooms in.
It's a collective bookkeeping system, right, via the internet. It's neither closed nor just specifically controlled by one party. And as mentioned again, it's public and distributed across everybody who is a part of the network. Good. So how does it work? Why do we need it? And is it, yeah, as you said, these days, is it worth it? Or is it just some waste of energy and work? Basically, the mining process as such, we have now the miner and we have the blockchain, right? And what the miner, simply speaking, does is he, by validating blocks, he verifies them and adds each single transaction to the blockchain, right? To the public ledger. And in return for this work he needs to do, he receives the block reward, which is nowadays 12.5 bitcoins for each single block, which is then halved every 210,000 blocks. And then for successfully doing that, right, you get also the transaction fee. And this basically is how mining claims to be profitable.
May I ask, what is the costs, the energy costs?
Yeah,
For example,
I can give a few examples also then when speaking about these key factors. So why do we need them? Simply because they are the ones who verify transactions, they keep the system running, right? They are the ones who maintain the network. They are also the ones who provide security because each single miner, each single node enlarges the whole network, which makes it then also more harder to find consensus, right? So the bigger the network, the more security it is. So that's the history of transactions. As I explained in a way that it's basically impossible to mutate. You would need vast amount of computational power to change back to the genesis block. I don't think that this is possible, but you know.
The calculation has been done apparently, and it will be in the trillions and trillions of
Or you
dollars.
can just cancel it. This is a test device I got from Sunrise, so it opens up sometimes, so just click cancel.
So at least with quantum computing, you could go back a couple of days, like, I don't know,
Yeah, then
wiped out yesterday, but you would still block the blockchain, right?
Exactly.
So you would still kind of interrupt.
You can interrupt, yeah.
You would interrupt it, so this whole infrastructure would get interrupted, but
Exactly.
you could not
You could
reverse
not
it.
alternate and reverse. At least
Mhm.
interrupting is possible. Yeah. Sure.
I don't know, just a question here, Stefan, and perhaps you're not the expert on security, but I guess as I was talking also with you, Martin, before, security is one of the topics that always comes up when you try to explain also blockchain to people who are not necessarily from the field. I think that sometimes, you know, we're losing perspective on other topics like quantum computing, right? It's now more of a reality than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, true.
So when that will come over, how will that affect blockchain as a technology, as a, you know, as a way of keeping things secure? Meaning, vast amount of power would then be available,
Yeah.
like it's not today. So,
Yeah.
do you have a statement, a position? What's your thought
No,
on
not
that?
yet, because this is also something we try to look into now. Because if we think of conventional mining, let's say Bitcoin mining, right? Bitcoin will come to a day where we've mined all of them. So, which makes it hard for us to do then anything else, right? We would need to switch to proof of stake mining, which is also not
By then you
maybe
would,
the most practical way.
by then you would assumably be able to live off the transaction costs. I mean, that's the plan,
that's
right?
the plan, but not to just rely on that. We also now think of ways to mine in a way that we're not specifically focusing on one currency, but
Mhm.
rather mining all kinds of transaction these days, right? And this also then goes in the direction of supercomputing, quantum computing, because with these FPGAs nowadays, this becomes more and more a reality, right? And we also now focus on developing them, so not just buying them off the shelf and install it somewhere and run them, and waiting for them to be, you know, turned over again. We really focus on developing based on what we can get on the market, and then trying to improve on our own. Yeah, so hardware, right? This is exactly where we're now. Yeah, so this is the slide on the key factors. So is it worth it? Basically, what we've experienced with our company is that electricity really is a key factor for us. So we've started in Austria. When we started, we made up quite good contracts with electricity suppliers. But then as it picked up, they increased pricings, which made it hard for us to stay profitable, which in the end was the reason for us to turn it down, at least for 2 or 3 months, trying to find different locations. And now lots of our miners are located in Russia, because there we have extremely good conditions. And
Iceland.
or Iceland, yeah. We had connections to Russia anyways, so it was also the reason for us to go there, because Russia is also something you need to take in consideration. You need security for your mining farms, right? It's not just a place where you put them up and hope for the best.
But why?
We
talking
have
physical security.
physical
Yeah, of
security.
Yeah.
It's physical security. Yeah.
And you think it's safe in Russia because there's so much, I don't know. Who's
Yeah,
right.
it is.
If you
It
know the
is.
right people.
It is when you know the right people.
Who's right?
It's you know, we've a partner of our company. He has quite good connections to some of the politics there. They can guarantee stuff.
Okay.
Anyways, the other part of our mining is still located in Austria, and this is the FPGA mining, right? We do ASIC mining in Russia, which is done for the most Bitcoin mining things, and FPGA back in Austria. The thing is, electricity is, I think, 3 times as high as in Russia, but the amount of energy you need to use for FPGAs is so much lower than you can balance out the ratio, right? So which it makes it even profitable in Austria. And we have it next to our company, which is also
What's
quite
that? And that's the coins like Ether and so on.
Yeah.
What's the most profitable at the moment?
We could look at
Yeah.
that. Does the links work with the phone as well?
Try it.
Just
Try it.
try. So yeah, energy consumption and electricity cost, and then the other thing is the source of energy, right? We know what China does. We know that they have like these big coal plants, and basically it's not sustainable in any kind of way to use that things for mining, which is something needing vast amounts of energy. So in
And how do you
Austria,
want to control it?
yeah, in Austria
Do you steal your equipment and you,
exactly.
what do you want to do?
In Austria, we work with water power at hydro plants, and in Russia, we work with natural gas, which gives us at least some kind of sustainability. Right?
Is it worth doing it with solar?
If you have high enough
Panels?
capacities for your solar stuff, could be. I mean, solar is also something which then depends on other things, right?
The efficiency of the solar panel.
Yeah,
If
stuff
you
like
have-
that.
And with
Weather,
night?
blah blah blah.
Yeah,
So-
okay, but that's why you have batteries, right? I mean, if you have place,
Yeah, okay.
batteries are cheap.
You have to do the math then whether it's
Yeah.
worthwhile though, probably. For the investment in panels and the batteries and everything.
Have you seen the list of the worldwide mining costs compared by countries?
Yeah, I've seen them.
So Georgia is also quite good, huh?
Yeah, there are a few who are quite
Venezuela.
big these days. Yeah, in Romania.
Okay, Georgia.
If you can play Bolivar, is fine.
Where does Switzerland sit on the chart?
Not too high up the
Okay.
top ranks, I would say.
Not in the top 5.
It's comparable to Austria,
Yeah, it's not that bad then.
but it's not
Upper
that
third.
bad. But still, it's not enough for being profitable in
Bitcoin.
a way that it makes sense for our customers, right?
Yeah.
So what do you then think of cloud mining?
Also
Okay.
then, back in the presentation, so then also used hardware. When we started mining, you paid 4,500 for a miner. Now you pay 1,200, 800, depending on which miner you get.
That's the old miners then.
The
The old
4,500
mining
ones are the old ones you could get from Bitmain. And this is also something you then have to take into consideration when thinking of pool mining, cloud mining, and also other stuffs of mining, but
Mhm.
later to that
With,
later.
with the prices crashing and a lot of miners just folding, apparently they're just selling their hardware by the kilo, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, this has impacted.
So
Hardware
if you
sales
have
as well,
the place and the capacity and
Yeah,
investing now in the hardware that
First-
people are throwing
But
away,
first of all,
but you need room,
yeah,
right?
the thing
The
is
thing is-
also,
It's a difficulty.
yeah, exactly. The thing is, what we've seen is since market crashed, lots of mining companies, rather smaller ones, turned down their equipment,
Mhm.
Mm.
and then they looked for opportunities where they could sell it. Right. So we had lots of inquiries of smaller mining farms trying to sell their equipment to us because they just were not profitable anymore.
Mhm.
And difficulty, of course, it just dropped
Mhm.
than what it was before, which made it easier for us to do mining in a more profitable way, of course.
Mhm.
Yeah, as I said, hash rate, right? The more hash power you have, the better it is. Just as simple as that. Difficulty basically measures how difficult it would be to find a new block compared to the easiest it could ever be. Right?
Mm.
But the more miners, the more nodes, the bigger the network, the higher the difficulty, and the harder for you to actually mine or validate one of those blocks. Then, of course, market value of currencies which are mined. What we do, we are not focusing on one currency like Bitcoin or Ether. We use an algorithm trying to calculate most profitable ones,
Mhm.
and then summing up to the top eight, and those are then mined. You do get paid in Bitcoin, but you're not necessarily mining Bitcoins. But this is not something the customer could really demand from us what we should mine, right? This would be then agreed in special cases.
How often do you
Switch.
reevaluate which ones you
It's
want to
done
buy?
every 60 seconds.
Oh, alright.
every 60 seconds, you have an algorithm.
Yeah,
Check
Mhm.
it.
every 60 seconds the system checks and switches.
Oh, that's quite frequent.
But
And
you need some
then,
time to mine, right? To mine a block.
yeah, that comes into play then as well. But most often, I mean, the algorithm is not just, shifting if there is a difference
Mhm.
between,
It's just
That's the
defining what
nuance.
is the next one
yeah,
to
exactly,
be mined.
exactly. But it's constantly checking what's coming up, what's there, and what's happening.
Mhm.
And then there's lots of hidden costs, right? Because when we speak of mining costs, most people, they just state electricity. But
Mm.
other than that, you have rents for your places.
Mhm.
You have some kind of insurance you need to take if you want to be serious. You need to have some kind of physical securities. And then there's also cost for using electricity networks, right? And this sums up. And then if you just look at the electricity price, you would be double or triple the price when summing up all the costs. So this
Mhm.
is something really important. And also for us, this was a reason why we went to Russia, because there we have like a package which is fixed, right, and cannot be increased by just somebody decides to demand more money from us. So yeah, let's see how this works out. So basically, no, I don't think that this works. Basically, what you can do is there's lots of ways to calculate quite easily and quickly. I just use what to mine for quick checks, right? You just go there, you enter your equipment specifications like the hash rate and the amount of power you would need to use. And then you also need to enter your electricity price, and it calculates how profitable you are, or if you even are profitable in the end.
So are you having a pool or are you offering a cloud?
We have a pool.
Mhm.
We have a pool. Does it work?
Manually.
I mean,
What's a return you usually have?
yeah, this is in the Excel file I just enclosed there. Then you can get a feeling of what comes into the calculation and what then is coming out in the best way. Right? So we give a calculation to our customers based on current state of the very specific date. Right? It's not something fixed, like for a year or even more. You always have to be aware that this is risk you actually take, even with mining, right? It's not something stable.
Another question, how do you handle you have to upgrade your gear, your mining gear,
Yeah.
once in a while. How often is that done? And
Now it's done every 2 years.
every 2 years.
Yeah.
Which is reasonable.
And
We've seen
based,
that. I can also explain this based on the calculation.
okay.
Yeah, this is the site. Basically, what you can do here, you could select ASIC mining, and then you see all the algorithms you would have, right? So the link I used was basically also already putting the correct numbers there, and then if you deselect all the, yeah, we don't need to do it now, it's just too complicated. You just select the algorithm you would like to have. For example, we mine with SHA-256, then you enter your hash rate, your watts, and then down here you can get your electricity costs, and then you can calculate. And what it does, it just calculates most profitable coin in terms of electricity costs already being taken off, or if you do not the hosting for mining, but rather a housing solution where you then pay your own electricity pricings, it gives you a value of what that would be. Right? Good, so how do I get back? Like, I'm not used to Samsung at all. Let's see whether the Excel file works. This would be good.
Let's try, but I don't think it will. No.
I can then show you on the.
Or you want to send it to me, just the file, and I will.
Yeah, I can also show you on my computer. That's fine. So basically, we then calculate for hosting and for housing. I'll show you that after the presentation, right?
I mean, all the miners were really struggling. The big miners having the latest equipment.
Yeah.
Also, Genesis mining is struggling a lot. Huh?
It is. Last time I checked their website, they were off. They said no service available. I
Exactly.
don't know what's happening with them, but yeah.
Exactly. They don't offer any packages anymore. So my question would be, how would you, as a smaller player, then be, let's say, more efficient in mining than the big players that have huge infrastructure with the latest mining equipment, really efficient processes?
That's the
To,
problem. Are they
so-
efficient?
To my
They are
understanding, is then really
Are highly efficient.
what's your costs? Definitely your costs, so not just electricity, but other costs for running the plant itself.
Because they're sitting in Iceland, they have some
I don't know what
big contracts in
could be.
place.
There's also
Cloudflare. Or
then stuff.
Genesis mining.
Genesis.
I don't know if you're familiar with all the other stuff like BitCloud network and stuff like that. Like they also have, to my mind, quite strange ways of how you getting paid as a customer, what ways they use to market themselves, stuff like that. So what I've seen is that there's lots of mining companies having lots of hidden costs in their back, and of course this is not what they're going to sell you, right? They just sell you the good numbers, the good figures, and then at some point they might be not able to deliver what they promised. And this might be the reason for also bigger players not being able to mine efficiently these days. We decided to move to Russia because we know that with these prices there, which are about 4 euro cents per kilowatt hour in total, so not just electricity, but rather rent, securities, insurances, and so on. It's 4 cents per kilowatt hour.
The biggest costs are definitely the electricity costs. Let's say the SGA, the selling general and
So-
administrative costs, they should be rather low. I mean, I maintain a Twitter profile, I maintain whatever, Telegram group, whatever, and then I give information to my customers, but the rest actually is the main costs are with the mining and getting this difficulty managed, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also then is a matter of how efficient your hardware works. we've made quite some steps with FPGA mining lately.
Can you explain the FPGA?
Yeah. So mining started with CPU, right? This was how it started. Basically, a CPU is designed to be some kind of executive calculator, right? So it could be seen as a small group of smart people focusing on a task they are given and they're going to solve it, right? And then rather GPU, which is designed to be a laborer, right? It's not designed to make decisions, it's just there for pure working power. And this is why it's even more effective than CPU. So then we switched from CPU to GPU. Then ASICs popped up, which is basically a microchip designed per a specific use, but just for this specific use, right? So you need to decide what you want to mine with it, what you want to do with it, and then it does exactly that. It's highly efficient in terms of power and total electricity consumption, of course, and therefore outperforming CPUs and GPUs. And then FPGAs, which is basically similar to an ASIC, but this is totally configurable and programmable, right? Just for your specific use case, and you can also change that. So you don't need to stick to a specific task. You could alternate. So any logical function, basically, you could think of, you can just implement. So I'm now not a programmer, but I know that for the FPGAs, it makes life for us a lot easier.
But if I get it right, I mean, to my understanding, an FPGA simulating exactly the same circuit as the ASIC would always be less efficient.
Yeah.
Or at most as efficient as the ASIC. But your advantage is that you can actually switch the algorithm by reprogramming it, and so switch to a more profitable algorithm.
True.
And that's where you have your margin.
And we consume much lower power.
Why?
That's what I don't get.
This is also like given from the technical perspective of it. I cannot explain why exactly, but we've seen
Maybe
it.
there's like a generation.
We've seen it like
so
for the ASIC, you would say like for a normal Bitcoin miner, which you could buy, let's say you would need 1,200 watts per hour. Yeah, AND miners and stuff like that. And for the FPGA cards, we now use roughly 120 watts per hour. So it's by factor 10 lower.
But
This
you
is
compare it to which to the latest ASICs? I mean, what
this is the ASICs we then develop in Austria. So this is not something you just buy off the shelf. This is something we buy the parts and then assemble it. You could think of like tuning a car, right?
Because there are different end miners, right? Z9, D5, and so on.
There's lots of different things. But the FPGA is something we now focus as a company because we think this is
gives you flexibility.
Yeah, it gives us flexibility,
Yeah.
and we closely work together with universities in Austria. They are also the ones who programmed our algorithms and stuff like that, and they are now the ones who do lots of development work for the FPGAs. Right? It's then also a matter of connecting them, of how you set up your motherboards, your total equipment, and then you drastically reduce consumption.
And this is for Bitcoin mining, and you were saying this is, you can switch easily, so it goes all proof of work, basically points.
Exactly.
You don't mind that one.
Yeah.
I think the difficult part is really developing the circuit, like programming the program. But you do that once, and then when you switch circuits, you just reprogram the FPGA, which then is more or less an easy step.
Since when are you doing that?
2017.
The
So-
FPGA?
No, FPGA is latest. The first ones were installed Q4 2018,
Okay.
and since then
That's brand new.
we're up with FPGA. So it's pretty new. And before we just did ASIC mining.
So do you feel the difference in profitability then?
Yeah, it's also, you have to take in consideration that the FPGA mining is done in Austria and the Bitcoin mining with the
So it
ASICs is done
balances
in
out.
Russia. So it balances but can also change in the future depending how efficient
Yeah.
the FPGAs then get.
Okay.
But there's nothing that prevents you from moving those to Russia. I mean,
Basically,
some rack space.
basically the only
Okay.
thing which is preventing us from moving to Russia right now is that we do not want to give up all the development which we have in Austria now and just move it to Russia and hope for the best. It would be needed something completely developed and then fine, and then we could think of moving them to Russia.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as long as we can run them in Austria with good profits, then for us it's totally fine. I mean, the figures are not bad, right? And for our customers, it's not something you know, it's not being a millionaire in 2 days, but it's compared to other stuff, it's quite profitable.
What's the profitability rate? I heard
we
something
say-
like 15.
No, 15 is not. It's by far too high. So for the
Really?
ASIC mining, so Bitcoin mining and stuff like that, which is done in Russia, we're between 4 and 5% a month,
And the
and then
FPGA?
the FPGAs is between 6 or 10%
At the current prices,
Yeah.
like
at current prices
no.
A month.
a month. So I can show you the calculation. This is what I did on Monday, so it's quite new.
Mm-hmm.
So when the price increases of Bitcoin,
When the price increases-
the difficulty increases.
Also difficulty
Probably.
increases,
More
but
money.
Yeah, more miners, huh?
but
Question is which one
changes the
will
picture.
increase more?
Yeah.
I mean, the
Mm.
price
Which
increases
goes,
more than
which
the
goes
number
faster,
of
right?
I mean, with
Mhm.
market situations being given right now, right, a
Mhm.
profitability of 4% or 6% for FPGAs is not too bad.
Mhm.
Even if it would be, I don't know, 2%,
Mm.
it's a lot.
It's a
Yeah,
problem.
yeah, okay.
comparing
And
with
what
other
happens
assets.
if what would happen if where we are now at 3.5, it dumps to 1,000?
You would reach a point where profitability is then gone, right?
And then you just switch off?
Depends on how other values then try to be, but since that Bitcoin is more of like the indicating value, right?
Mhm.
I guess if Bitcoin drops down, also the rest will go down as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah.
So maybe there will be coins surviving long enough to keep it running, but in the end, if worst case scenario happens, we just have to switch off.
Okay.
That's life. I mean,
yeah.
it's still a risk business. It's not something not like going to the bank and then have a fund which makes you, I don't know, 0.5% a year.
Mhm.
You have to be aware of that, of
Mm.
course, right? Yeah. Good. So, yeah, different types of mining. Basically, mining pools. This is also what we do, with a few exceptions. All of your resources which you buy are then connected to the mining pool. And then the mining pool takes care of running the hardware, maintaining the hardware, programming it, installing it, and so on. So basically, what you need to do, just give the hardware to the pool and wait for your profits. What you have to take in consideration, if you think of a pool having old equipment, let's say we have a pool up and running since beginning of 2017. At those days we sold miners for 4,500. Now a miner costs 1,200, which is giving you a difference in terms of profitability. So also customers who are part of the pool for a longer time can benefit from new equipment if the ratio between new equipment and old equipment is high enough, right? And of course, our users or customers, they don't need to manage anything on their own.
You have
And-
your own pools, or you
Yeah.
join some third-party pools?
Have you, before you made your own pool, have you joined, were you in another mining pool before, and that's what got you to this
No, no.
idea, or
We had quite an investment in the beginning,
in Bitcoin?
and then
ASIC mining.
In the mining
yeah,
power.
I know
in
mining.
Because if you have your own
Yeah,
pool, you
then,
need to have like a decently
separately.
sized share of the
Yeah.
hash rate already,
Yeah.
or you never see a block.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. This was also something we struggled a little bit in the beginning,
Yeah.
because, of course, over the last 2.5 years, the pool increased, which now is giving us quite good position. I mean, we're not the biggest one out there, but also in terms of size, it's reasonable for us to be profitable still, with given conditions we have.
Mm.
What is your pool called? For me,
It's script mining. Script, like
script
script.
okay, script mining.
I mean, our users own their hardware, but practically speaking, if market crashes and this hardware is not used for what it should be used anymore, what would you do with a hardware which is not worth anything anymore? Right?
Yeah,
It's a cool paperweight.
What would you say? So you own something, but it's just worth something until
It generates value, of course.
I mean, all these ASIC mining equipment
Yep.
resources, they got quite outdated
Yep.
actually before the 2 years life cycle. Huh?
Yeah, this is something what also comes into consideration then when doing the calculations. I can show you then what our model is exactly behind that, to make sure that we're not exceeding these 2 years or exceeding the lifetime of our equipment, right? So then there is cloud mining, which in the end is utilizing some kind of remote data center for mining tasks. You just subscribe, you pay them the fee, and they pay you back revenues.
There was quite a fight, I think it was at Genesis Mining,
Yeah.
that they were selling a hash rate, but a hash rate based on a certain equipment.
Yeah.
And people expected to buy a hash rate, but they didn't want to accept that they were buying at a certain hash rate based on a specific equipment piece. I think this is a fight between the hash rate and okay, I'm actually owning that
Yeah.
equipment and it
Yeah.
can't catch up
Exactly.
to the new difficulty, and
Yeah.
that's why my hash rate is then lower.
Yeah.
Right?
True. Yeah.
So in this case, it's the same, right? It's the same hardware
It's the same.
or specific hardware you would own, and then that's the risk you take.
Yeah, exactly. And then what you also could do is to do it just on your own. If you have enough hardware power or hash power, you would have a chance to do. But I would say to be a standalone miner, it's quite hard. So, just to be on there, that is a possibility, but not something, I guess, it's highly profitable these days. So basically, this is now what we do. Our customers order their hardware through our company, give them to our pool, to our association. We then ship them to the mining locations. We install them, we maintain them, we service them. So this shipment installation takes longest 2 months, right? Simply until we get them, until we ship them, and so on. So we've been faster than that, of course, but 2 months is like the longest it could ever take. Then we start them up, we maintain them, we service them, and in the end, you just need to let us know your wallet ID, and then you're getting paid into Bitcoins, and then you can do whatever you want with your Bitcoins in the end, right? So, as it's done with an association, this is also something quite easily handleable in terms of taxes and stuff like that. So the customer then has to decide whether paying it out, transferring it, and then takes care of his task things on his own. This is not something we cover.
So you have from the profits that this miner makes, you deduct your costs plus a margin markup. Alright.
So in the end,
And you have a markup also on the miner because you've built them yourself. You said.
the miner
You give that cost.
for the ASIC miner,
Yeah.
for the things you could buy on Bitcoin, we buy them and give them to the customer. Let's say the miner costs 1,200. The customer buys it for 1,200.
Okay,
so
so
we
you-
don't
you
charge fees for the
Don't have a
mining
markup
equipment.
there.
The thing is, after, or let's put it otherwise, we have let's say you make 5% a month, right? 25% of these 5% you're getting paid on your wallet each month. 40% of your revenue is kept on a cold wallet, so it's stored until your initial price which you invested is breached again, and then at that point you get paid back your initial investment, or you reinvest. It's basically then on your own decision, right? And 35% are getting deducted for our company, which means we cover service, we cover maintenance. We also have to run our offices, right? And we also have to pay our employees. And then
35%.
the contract is terminated after 2 years, or even earlier if you reach your investment. If this outbalances what you get paid monthly, then you're done, and then the contract is
So
signed off.
you will not pay out anything if the initial value plus 25% is reached?
Yeah.
Why?
Basically, no. We pay out the cold wallet as soon as the initial investment is reached, or the customer reinvests with this money into new mining
Yeah,
equipment.
what happens with the old one if it's not 2
The
years
old one is then kept until contract is done, right? It mines until the contract is finished, and then by that time the contract finishes, the customer agrees that he hands over his equipment to our company, and we keep it running as long as it possibly goes. We've made the experience we can keep them up maybe for another few months in order to make it profitable, and this is then of course for our company an initial or
So basically,
way
just,
of earning money.
5%.
just to recap, the first part, like buy the device, actually means I pay you the 1,200 to rent it for 2 years, because after 2 years it goes into
Basically,
your property.
basically you could think of it as
It's like a
as
leasing with a return value of 0.
Yeah, exactly. This is how it works. Yeah. Of course, we then earn money for equipment we never had to buy on our own, right? After the contract is done and after the equipment goes back to us.
If the equipment still is like
If it is still
reasonably
reasonable
technically
to use.
advanced.
But what's the concept behind it.
How much is the FPGA?
In terms of price, it's 10,000 per card.
10,000 per
Yeah.
month.
What's the minimum allotment to become a customer of yours? So what's the minimum investment?
2,000.
2,000.
It's the
2,000
maximum
is-
investment.
We've honestly, this is something I argue about a lot. So we've had lots of small customers in the beginning, and they just paid like 2,000, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 maybe. But with all these small investors, right? You also have to do shitloads of work. You have to take care of orders all the time. You ship your equipments back and forth all the time. Doesn't make life easier for us. So, of course, the bigger the customer, the happier I am. And so what we've decided to do now for customers ready to invest a minimum of 500,000, we can create an own housing system, which is then specifically treated for them, taken care of. You have access to it. You can even have remote access to your equipment. You get a camera installed. You see what's done there. You get provided with live data. You also need to take care of other things. Let's say you've got a container full of miners. You create lots of heat, right? So the heat needs to be deducted. Things needs to be cooled. All these things also come into consideration when speaking of profitability. So, yeah, just electricity prices.
Furthermore, you're always at a disadvantage compared to the big companies. Like, let's say NVIDIA or the guys who are producing the newest mining software, they will probably, before they sell it to mining pools, they're going to use it themselves to mine efficiently for a couple of months. I assume that the hardware is not going to get to
when we
street
buy
right away.
equipment, we've had the experience in the beginning. Some of the equipment we bought for our customers didn't work right from the beginning, simply due to damages for shipment reasons or other stuff. So what we did now is to get quality control in place. So when we get them, they are checked whether they are performing as they should be, and if not, they get sent back and we get a refund. Yeah, exactly. And we cover it by insurance. So
You have an insurance that covers that.
in the end, you know, if I don't know, an earthquake happens and half
Or-
of Russia disappears,
Or
I
if,
cannot do
like,
anything.
somebody
for you,
lights a flame to it, or
yeah, but it's insured in a way that when it stops working for no apparent reason, right, due to
Okay.
technical malfunctions,
Yeah.
you get refund.
Okay.
So in the profitability equation, isn't taxation a factor as well?
Because we
No.
mine as an association.
Okay.
We get it as well.
So
tax,
you're-
right?
So that means that in
Exempt from
Russia
tax.
it's tax free or what?
Basically,
No one knows the transaction flow.
when you let's say you I don't know, earn, to my understanding it's like
Yeah.
that you earn, I don't know, 1,000 bitcoins, you've got your 1,000 bitcoins on your wallet. As soon as you transfer it to fiat money, you then
pay
need to
taxes?
tax it, right? And this is something which is then taken over to our customers, because we say, well, look, this is the situation,
Yeah.
and you then have to take care of your own assets.
I mean, to your customers, I mean, I guess you need to maintain the record of exactly how much you're mining, you're transferring, so you need to be transparent and reporting that to your customers.
And this is
Yeah.
also, you know, Austria, like, since we've started, we've had authorities in for 3 or 4 times now, and they request lots of stuff. Even money laundering is extremely something of an issue for us.
Yeah.
So what we demand is, like, you know, a declaration of our customer that he is not doing money laundering. He needs to prove that he is actually the one who is buying it. You know, lots of issues to
So
take
you have to
care of.
adhere to KYC
The
regulations.
KYC,
Yeah.
Even for virgin coins, it's crazy, right?
Are you doing
It's
KYC
crazy, man.
yourselves, guys, or
That's where it's gonna go.
no?
Yeah. Then basically some facts and figures on the block halving, you can look it up on your own, right? And also on some charts, like how the difficulty performs, how the hash rate increases, number of transactions per day, stuff like
What are you expecting with the Constantinople? Because they're going from a block reward of 3 to 2, right?
Mm.
that. Yeah,
Postponed, or-
yeah, it's
It's
postponed.
postponed again.
Yeah, it's postponed. I know it's postponed, but I
It's
mean,
supposed to be
is
like
that going to
this
affect?
weekend.
I've not
Postponed
spent
already.
lots of time checking that on my own now.
Mhm.
Could be. We'll see. A few words on Lightning.
Mhm.
Basically, what the issue is with, let's say, the Bitcoin blockchain. In terms of transactions per second, it's about 10 to 12, right? If we compare this to, let's say, Visa, it's 1,000 transactions per second. So a lot more than that, which then gives us some kind of scaling difficulty for the Bitcoin blockchain, right? So Lightning Network basically tries to provide a solution for that by opening up a channel between 2 parties, A and B, who want to send funds to them. So you need proof of work, or a mining proof for opening up the channel, because as soon as the channel is opened, they can send back and forth money or funds without affecting the blockchain as a network. They just have a network between their own, right?
So it's
It
like a
even-
sidechain.
Yeah.
It's a
Kind of
sidechain.
Lightning is kind of like a switch.
And basically it also would work with a hub, let's say, in terms of liquidity issues. You would have a hub in place, right? customer A tries to send 0.5 bitcoins to customer B, cannot do that. He goes to the hub, and the hub manages that. Of course,
Can anyone become a hub?
Yes.
if you
If I run a Lightning node on my computer at
if
home,
you have enough liquidity, you could. Yeah,
theoretically.
theoretically you can.
But is there any reward for being a hub?
You get then transaction fees as well. Right.
Okay.
So transaction fees still are a topic. Basically, it's extremely fast compared to normal transaction usage on the blockchain, and I guess fees are just small, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
still, there are fees, right?
But it's just lots of fees and lots of small fees instead of a few big
The
ones.
only thing is, for the hubs, as I said, you need lots of liquidity to become a hub, to be a hub, to manage all these transactions.
Mhm.
And since there's lots of ways, lots of channels, lots of opened transaction ways, the network always needs to know what's the fastest, the cheapest, and the most secure way to manage these transactions.
With you guys being then miners of Bitcoin and you always have liquidity, are you running Lightning nodes and
You could, basically, if
Wouldn't that
you're
make sense?
liquid enough. But the thing is, mining is not. Lightning is something different than mining, right?
yeah, I know.
Because for mining, you definitely need something which is proving that you did work, and then you get rewarded, which is done by the proof of work.
Yeah, but for the
concept.
Lightning you just need the liquidity if I'm not
And
mistaken.
for the Lightning, speaking as a miner, as I said, you need to validate opening and closing a channel. So as soon as lots of channels are opened and closed constantly, you also have stuff which you can do which you can mine, right? So miners still earn for opening and closing these channels. And if we now would think of Lightning Network adoption as something increasing value, increasing market value, increasing the amount of transactions, also closing and opening channels will rise.
So Stefan, how is that affecting you guys? I mean, where is it in your business model? I mean, is it even your business model?
No.
Are you
So
running-
far it's not.
Are you running these nodes or not?
No.
Okay.
I'm just a bit confused regarding the miners are needed for opening and closing channels.
No,
Yeah.
the Lightning nodes are. I don't think
I'm
miners are.
not quite
Basically,
getting.
you need to prove. You need a proof of work also for opening up the channel.
Sorry,
For
that's
opening
my-
the Lightning
Yeah.
network channel, you need proof of work.
You need proof of work that the channel is opened, and then
Yeah.
as soon as the channel is done, as the channel is
Yeah.
active, then this has nothing to do with the blockchain or proof of work concept. It just goes back and
Yeah, but
forth
how do
between two
you
clients.
make sure that the channel stays open? And
In the end, then the channel is